Hi there! Today we're going to be making the yoke rig for surf casting. The yoke rig is designed to cast a really long distance. It's quite aerodynamic in shape and doesn't have any traces hanging off the side and flapping around, which causes a lot of wind resistance and shortens your cast considerably. The overall length of this yoke rig, from the sinker to where it's tied onto the main line from the rod, is 600 millimeters, and the trace, which can be unclipped with a Genie clip just there, the traces are just 300 millimeters. And the way to go about this is to tie 2 or 3 extra traces, and then you can cast out as soon as you get to the beach with your first line, first trace, and then you can bait up the other 2 as well, and then when you wind in, it's a really quick job to take that one off and quickly clip on another one and cast straight out almost instantly, which is good in a fishing competition, of course. How the rig works is the trace pulls down, which causes the sinker to rise up, and then the hook goes on the clip there, and it's held in place by gravity. And then we cast her out, and when it hits the water there, as you can see, the trace just drops away. Now, a couple of really good points about this is that the trace can just swing around in the wash, and then when a fish takes, as it pulls on there, it takes until the sinker reaches the clip before the line goes tight and sets the hook on the fish. And then when you wind it in, the sinker's going first and the fish is behind it. It works very well, and you'd be surprised how much extra distance you can get when casting with the yoke rig. The first thing we're going to do before tying up the yoke rig is bend the stainless steel wire to make up one of these little clips which holds down the hook. And the whole idea of it is that this clip slides along, oh, it's quite tight, it slides there, you see, along the line, and you can put it just where you want it. Here I'm using 2mm stainless steel wire, and we'll later use a 3mm clear plastic length of tube. Sometimes, well, in the past, I've used 2mm galvanised wire, and it seems to work just as well. You know, it'll ultimately rust, I guess. I'm probably going to have well lost the rig or come up with some other idea or whatever long before it's going to end up rusting through. Galvanised wire is, well, less than half the price of stainless. But the most important thing is that your tube, the plastic tube that goes over the top, is about 1mm in diameter bigger than the wire, so that the monofilament backbone can pass through between the tube and the wire. I just use hand tools like pliers and side cutters and things to make these clips. You could make up something fancier, sort of a rig, if you're going to produce them in any kind of large numbers. It doesn't cost very much for the wire. You don't need that many, so doing it by hand is fairly easy. This is a job best done, say, over the winter months in the evenings. And you can tie up a number of rigs and then put them into plastic Ziploc lunch bags, and write on the outside with a felt pen exactly what the rig is on the inside so that you can find it again later. I'm tying this yoke rig fairly slowly and trying to focus on the camera so you can see what I'm doing. In real life, you'd be able to make the rigs up quite a lot faster than this. I reckon that's pretty cool how you make these stoppers by cutting off short lengths of Fluro tube and then passing the line through them twice, and when you pull it tight, pull the monofilament tight, Fluro tube forms a nice tight stopper over the top of the mono. I've used two here in order to make the whole sliding hook release clip nice and tight so that it doesn't just drop down. You want it to be good and tight on the monofilament backbone. Now what I've used to tie up this rig is 80-pound mono. And some might think, well, that's fairly heavy, but when you're doing when you're surf casting and you've got quite a big sinker on, you're putting, or, you know, a 6-ounce sinker, you're putting quite a lot of heft into the cast and you're putting a lot of strain on that rig. When surf casting, I use a 50-pound monofilament shock leader wound on to my reel over the top of either the mono or more recently of course braid, and that shock leader's about 2 rod lengths, and if you use anything lighter than 50 pound there's always that good chance that it's going to snap off mid-cast because you're putting quite a lot of heft into sending this sinker out, 6-ounce sinker out, and sometimes I use even 9-ounce sinkers. So therefore, I like to use an 80-pound backbone in my surf casting rigs. You can make the leader from lighter monofilament. Again, I wouldn't go down below 50 pound. One of the great things about surf casting, you can never be quite sure what you might hook. It might be a big ray or a skate, a shark, carwai, snapper, all sorts of things. And if you put too light a line on there and then you hook something big, you're going to probably end up losing it. There we're seeing the two ends of the backbone. Now, I like to tie my surf casting hooks on. I like to snell them on using the tube knot. I think it gives you a really strong attachment, and what I really like about it is it makes the hook stand straight out at the end of the line. It doesn't just flop around and drop down. Usually I'd tie a dozen or more of these traces, and I'd put the hook in my fly tying vise just to hold it. It acts like a sort of a third hand, but you don't need to, and as you can see here, I can also do it just by holding it in my hand. It's always easier, of course, when you do this if you allow that little bit of extra line. When using heavy 80-pound monofilament, or even 50-pound, I find it's much better to tighten the knots using a pair of pliers. But if you're using lighter line, if you're only going to use, say, 30-pound or less, you've got to be a bit careful doing that, because you can put so much strain on the knots that you end up seriously weakening them. Another thing, of course, you've always got to watch out for is when you're pulling the knots tight, that you don't accidentally pull the hook into your fingers or into your hand, which is easily enough done. So you've always got to be thinking to yourself, now if that hook comes out of my grip, where's it going to end up? I've caught heaps of fish on these 6-bar Jarvis Walker Suicide hooks. More recently, we've been catching snapper on them as well. And the snapper seemed to go for the Fluro tube glow-in-the-dark arrangement that we've got on here. It certainly won't do you any harm. That little bit of extra bling will get you more bites. It certainly seems to work okay. The reason for the stopper here is to stop the Fluro tube from sliding back down the trace, and keeps it nice down at the hook end. What is also interesting is that whether it's green Fluro tube or pink, they both glow the same colour at night, and that's a sort of a bright fluoro green. Even the pink actually glows green. But the two different colours, the two contrasting colours, I think look a little bit more effective during daylight. Once it gets dark, they're just going to appear all the same colour to the fish. As I mentioned earlier, it's a good idea to tie up 2 or 3 extra traces and then store them in the same bag so that you can switch them over at the beach. You can have them baited up and then just hook them straight on.